Morning, folks. Hope you're all doing well. We're going to continue looking at Unit 6. We're on the second last lecture. But before we do, I just want to address something that I noticed. And I probably should have noticed this sooner, but I didn't. Whenever you access any of the projects or the written responses, please make a copy for yourself. Some of you have wrote your answers on the original copy, which then is transferred to everyone else. So it really does make it difficult to know who is doing the work and who is just simply catching a break. I've seen and I've gone through what the answers were that were posted for everyone. So if I see that you've simply just copied it, then I can't give you a mark for it, and I won't. So if you want to get a mark for it, make sure it's your own work. So going forward, please make a copy for yourself when you do these sort of things. It's in the instructions, so you just have to read the instructions and then just do it, and everything will be great. Okay, so that's my little announcement for today. What we will do is continue on. It is going to be probably a pretty short video today because this lesson is pretty short. So we're on student activity 40, promoting a national identity. This is page 15 in the student activity book, or this is slide 38 in the presentation. The focus question is, what is Canada's national identity? So yesterday we spoke a lot about internationalism and international issues related to internationalism. So we're going to shift the attention not onto the international scale, but more take it back to look at Canada specifically and what promotes a national identity within a world that is a lot more international, a lot more connected than it was before. So countries can promote a national identity to protect itself from what some people can argue as too much pressure from international organizations or an international movement. So we're gonna introduce three terms: national myth, national symbols, national myths, national symbols, and cultural institutions. So we talked about this probably in the first unit. So this will be a little bit more of a focus and a refresher on that. So we'll just go through it, and then that's it for today. So national myths, they're really important in creating a sense of unity. It brings people together because it's something they can focus their attention on. We see that in Canada, myths do create this strong sense of unity. We talk about the myths of Canada, these events that took place when Canada was created, that we can hold on to and that distinguish us from other people. So in an international situation, we as Canadians, well, we talk about our country being this large country that was built by immigration. It's often seen as being discovered by Europeans, but it did have millions of indigenous people living on it. So then that just throws into question this sort of some of these myths. But we do see some words coming out about Canadians and the myths that we've created for ourselves. National myths can be used to promote identity. For instance, Canada as a nation of peacekeepers is a widely held myth. So when we talked about the UN and the missions that Canada has been a part of, we talked about Rwanda. I mentioned Cyprus. We have been involved in many different peacekeeping missions. That is what Canada is seen as. These myths, though, they can and do sometimes go into the area of stereotypes. They can slowly build because of social interaction and the social climate that we live in an international scale, especially when countries come together and they meet each other. Certain myths can turn into these stereotypes. So, for example, on slide 40, there are 10 beliefs about Canada by people in other countries. So, Toronto is Canada's capital city. Not true, but again, if people don't know much about Canada, they only know the big cities. So, like Toronto is probably the most well known. Canada is always cold. Well, that's almost true. But we still get warm weather, especially in other parts of the country. All Canadians speak French. Canada is so safe they don't have to lock their doors. Well, we know these aren't true. Canadians are hippie liberals. Again, especially in Alberta, that's definitely not true. The Liberal Party is all but a side note in Alberta. You will see moose, beavers, and other wildlife in Canada. Well, that is kind of true, but also depends on where you live. Like, if you're living in a city, maybe not as often. Canada is a part of the United States. No. Mounties in red uniforms police Canada. No. Canadians don't own guns. No, they do. And it's even interesting that recently, underneath all of these international stories and things going on, the Liberals have actually passed a gun ban on automatic weapons because of what happened in Nova Scotia. So it is interesting. And all Canadians say A. Well, maybe not. Depends. So these are myths that have turned into almost stereotypes. National symbols are a little bit different from myths because these are things that we can see or we assume belong to a certain country. So Canada has a number of symbols associated with it. For example, the beaver. It started off as a part of Canada's fur trade. Now it's on I think it's on the nickel. The Rocky Mountains, hockey, Canadian goose, and the maple leaf. These are symbols that when people see them, they can think of Canada. So, like, for example, if you buy a shirt with a maple leaf on it and it's red, people will jump to conclusions. Whether a symbol is accurate or represents all of Canada is debatable. The choice of symbols to represent Canada can sometimes lead to divisions as well as unity. So, for example, the Rocky Mountains is one. If you live in Western Canada, yeah, the Rocky Mountains are an hour away from us. But if you live in the Maritimes, like say in Newfoundland or New Brunswick, well, maybe they don't really mean as much to you. Whereas, say, other things would, like hockey. So hockey would be really an excellent example too, because for some people, hockey is Canada's sport. Some people have grown up playing hockey. But if you're a new immigrant, or you are from a family of immigrants who never played hockey or came from a place where ice wasn't really something you saw every year, then hockey doesn't mean anything to you. So again, it can pose different questions. So the next few slides are just examples of symbols. So on slide 42, if you look at it, this is obviously Canada. We actually see the flag. We see a bunch of different animals, maple syrup, our parliament, the lighthouse, I believe that's in Newfoundland, and hockey and nature. And then Toronto is there too. So that's the example of national symbols. So the next one here is Italy. So the country is actually there. And they have the emblem, the Colosseum, football, just different things that we associate with Italy. On slide 44, it may take you a second to figure out what this is, but this is India. So the tiger is a national symbol, the lotus, the rupee sign, the three lions is the symbol for India, and then the Ganges, which is a very important river in northern India. Slide 45. It's the United States, so they have the Capitol or the White House. They have Statue of Liberty, the Grand Canyon. It is interesting that they have a headdress because of the way that the Native Americans were treated by the United States government. So that's very interesting. Slide 46, this is Russia, obviously, and we know this primarily because the symbol in the top right corner, the Kremlin, or not, that's not the Kremlin, that's St. Basil's, and then vodka. And the flag is there too. Slide 47, again, we associate this one with animals, so we know this is Australia. Cultural institutions. Cultural institutions, these are organizations designed to preserve and promote culture. In Canada, these institutions are influenced by European culture, so French and English, and Indigenous culture. So the three founding groups of Canada are brought together in these institutions. Many of these organizations are government supported because of the fear of the overwhelming nature of American culture on Canada and the world. So we are next to one of the centers of culture in our world. American culture is super powerful, and it has the ability to absorb other cultures into it. And there is that fear that if the United States is unchecked in its culture, it can just bulldoze over Canadian content. So there are laws that are put in place to prevent that from happening. An excellent example of this is South Korea. So South Korea in the 80s, I believe, it banned outside influence in terms of culture from coming in, so then it could promote its own culture. And now we see South Korean culture spreading throughout the world. So things like Korean dramas. If you have Netflix, there's plenty of them to watch. There is K-pop, the music from South Korea. It is expanded, and it is probably one of the, if not the dominant source of culture in Asia. I would only say maybe Japan has as large a influence. So there are institutions in Canada that are designed to create and protect Canadian content. So, for example, the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Company, the National Film Board of Canada, Aboriginal People's Television Network, and Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission. These are all created to protect Canadian content. And there's actually laws in place that help to protect and have told radio and television and online sources of media that they have to have a certain amount of Canadian content, or else their licenses will actually be suspended. So it is a serious thing. For some people, it really doesn't matter. For some people, if they don't watch Canadian content and they're strictly watching another country's content, then they don't really mind. So it really depends on your position and your view about things like cultural institutions. So that's actually it. So we're just going to summarize, what is Canada's national identity? Well, it depends on a few things. It depends on how deep you want to take this question. If you want to look at Canada's national identity as symbols, so national symbols, then you're going to talk about the things that you can see. Animals, then nature, hockey, maple leafs, the CN Tower, these sort of things, Parliament. But if you wanted to talk about myths, then you're going to talk about things like overcoming the elements, multiculturalism. You're going to talk about peacekeeping. So all of these things come together. Myths and symbols, they come together, and they make a national identity easier for people to see and understand. And it makes them stand out when we talk about Canada in the international world, in an international setting. It distinguishes us from Americans, from the English, because and Australians, New Zealanders, anyone that speaks English, we distinguish ourselves based on these myths and these symbols. That is what, I guess that's a good summary of what is Canada's national identity. So that's it for today. Continue working on your booklet. If you keep sending stuff in, remember, June 12th is the last day I'm going to take anything in. After that, don't bother. And yeah, I'll see you tomorrow for the last video of this school year. or maybe not school year, but the last, but whatever. I'm talking too much. See ya. Bye.